Howdy, Shasta College. How you doing? It is Thursday, April what? 18th, 2024. Hope you're doing well. We're done with cinema. Uh, Although cinema never ends. Not really, at least not with me. Um, Maybe you like movies also. Of this week, next week, and next week, we're going to be talking about literature, the novel, and and other forms of literature. When's the last time you read a novel? When's the last time you read a book for pleasure, for joy, not because it was an assignment? Pardon me. Um, my guy's out there mowing lawn. I'm getting a bunch of allergies coming in my door, trying to fight it off. Maybe you're having the same trouble. Anyway, so we're going to be doing some reading now instead of watching, although you'll probably be watching some documentaries about reading and novelists. And we're not going back too far. We've already discussed early writers like Shakespeare and Chekhov and others and playwrights, but now we're doing novelists. What is a novel? Well, it's a work of fiction. And now, the first thing you say to yourself, oh, then it's not true. Well, au contraire. Fiction is the holy truth. Just because it's a fictionalized story doesn't mean it's not true, meaning the characters are true, uh, the story is true to life. It's life. Novels are life. The earliest novels, Don Quixote and other novels, usually dealt with heroes. Um, the modern novel, maybe that does the same thing. When's the last time you guys read a book? Was it a Harry Potter, Stephen King? Those are modern popular writers. Literary fiction um, is kind of not so popular anymore, but in the mid 20th century was very popular, especially coming out of the World War II. And we had what they call the post war authors who were writing about their war experience in World War II. They survived the war and they wrote novels about it. Some of the famous novels would be Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse Five, which was made into a great movie. Um, Joseph Heller's Catch 22, which was made into a great movie. James Jones's Thin Red Line, Norman Mailer's Armies of the Night. So many authors came out of World War II and wrote about what they saw, what they felt in a truthful way, but set with fictitious characters. Um, but through observation and experience, it seemed like you're reading, something that actually happened. They always tell you in writing class to write what you know. Well, that's a good piece of advice because we only know so much, and we should write about it. We all have a voice. I always tell my students who want to be writers or write something when they say everything's been written, not true. Your story hasn't been written, or the story you could come up with in your voice. And that's hard to find your voice as a writer. I teach creative writing also. That's what my degree's in, is in creative writing, my master's. And it's not easy to find your voice through writing. It takes practice, just like learning an instrument. Anything worthwhile doesn't come easy. And so people who do a lot of journaling, that's good practice. But a novel isn't your journal. A novel is a story that's got a beginning, middle, and end, lots of conflict, lots of interesting characters, hopefully. And you've got a story to tell. And we all have a story to tell. We certainly do. So this week into next week, we're going to be talking about writers. I'm going to sign a paper to write about an author. I'll send it tomorrow. It'll be due in a week. It'll be an essay on an author that I choose. You probably have never heard of them. Uh, that's good. That's what education's all about. Writing about stuff you don't know about, and you learn about that thing. Um, so be prepared for that essay coming up. Um, I'm not done grading the quizzes. I'm only speaking briefly tonight. Um, I rambled on way too long tonight. On the end of cinema. My apologies. Um, there's so much to cover in these things. It's hard for me to cover everything in 1 week. Uh, um, but we'll do our best. So, what do we have coming up after writers? We're gonna have music. We'll be doing other things. We'll be doing other creative arts, even architecture. Um, trying to make it as relevant to you guys as possible. Because if it's not relevant to you, you'll lose interest. But hopefully, you don't lose interest and we keep pushing forward with our yearning for knowledge about the arts and the world we live in. Um, I want to briefly talk about a few things. Uh, one is the quiz, which I'm not done grading yet, but almost finished it today, but I got interrupted. So I have a few more. And I made it very clear in the assignment what 3 questions based on the documentary Easy Rider Raging Bulls. What I was looking for, how did the culture around us, that means everything around us, the culture is our world we live in. What is our culture now? Well, it's spring for one. It's what's going on in the world. We're in Gaza. We have a war in Ukraine. We got a presidential election. We got an ex-president on trial. We've got a lot of things happening. Uh, what's your favorite music? Taylor Swift, sorry, whatever. Um, this is all part of our culture. And so, how did the culture influence those filmmakers that were coming out of film school, like Francis Coppola and George Lucas and Steve Spielberg? And I explained it in the lectures and in the documentary. It opens up with it. Guys, we're in the middle of Vietnam War in that era, the 60s, early 70s. We have assassinations of the president. We have Robert Kennedy's killed, Martin Luther King's killed, assassinations, civil unrest because of the Vietnam War and protesting against that. The draft was happening. You could be drafted into the army and have to go fight in a country you understand the war, but you're 19, you could get drafted. So that was a big deal to these filmmakers because they're all draftable age. And Hollywood had lost their way with trying to figure out what the culture, the audience was anymore. Their audience was younger and hipper. They're college educated and they wanted more, something more that the studio systems weren't offering. They were still trying to put out the old fashioned fairy tale entertainment, which are fun. They made some good movies. Obviously, they did. But the kids weren't relating to it. They didn't see when they're watching The Sound of Music or they're watching Hello Dolly or they're watching Mr. Doolittle, Dr. Doolittle, anything they could relate to. There's just more fantasy fairy tales coming out of Hollywood from an aging studio system run by a generation that had run it for decades and didn't understand the youth of today, of that day, which would be the 60s. And the youth of that day was listening to Jimi Hendrix, and uh, they were taking drugs. The birth control had come out, so there was kind of free love going on. At the time, people were growing their hair. Guys were protesting the war. Uh, Black people in this country were trying to get a fair shake. They wanted the voting rights. Women were starting to want their free rights and free pay, equal pay. There was a lot of stuff, and then we had the White House to deal with. Richard Nixon was not the he was not beloved, and they didn't call him Tricky Dick for nothing. And so he's against the students. They wanted to put everybody in jail. That was their way of dealing with civil unrest. And here are these young filmmakers coming out of film school in the 60s. They wanted to tell their stories about their generation and the things that concerned their generation, not the older generation. How do they do that? Well, the old generation didn't want to listen to them until a movie by the name of Easy Rider, which was made for $300,000 and made $100 million, changed everything. Here, kids saw characters they related to, music they related to. The first um, Hollywood movie that had a rock and roll soundtrack by hits of the day. Dennis Hopper, who directed it, owned all those records, and he just dropped the needle when, meaning on the record. They had needles in those days for records. Now it's all downloads. I realize that, but in those days they had what you would call vinyl, and so he that was right at his record collection. Born to Be Wild, the um, um, and the band, and the Birds, Bob Dylan, and it was a phenomenon. People went to it. My generation, it was perfect for my generation. We went to it, and our minds were blown. We loved the music. We loved the way the guys looked and the girls looked, and yes, they were smoking some pot, and they seemed to be free, and they wanted a different kind of life than their parents had. They wanted a utopia type of life that I'm afraid never happened because it's based on a hope and a dream and naivete. Um, but that movie broke everything open. Now, other Hollywood loves the money coming in, and so they go, well, we don't know how to make these movies. We're too old for this. We don't understand this music. We don't understand the the, the motorcycles, the long hair, the cool looking girls. They didn't understand it, and so these young filmmakers they understood it, and so they had stories to tell, and so they pitched their stories to these guys who, because of the money made with Easy Rider, they thought, well, they must know something we don't. So they let them in the gates, and they made movies like Mean Streets, Badlands, Godfather, Conversation, Harold and Maude, MASH, Nashville, Shampoo. Some of the greatest movies ever made was made in those 10 years. And they made money. And the studios opened the doors even further to more of these young auteur filmmakers. Auteur simply means author, author of their own work. And which was phenomenon. And these young filmmakers who were influenced by the culture and wanted to tell their stories that had relevance to them and the cult and their generation also were influenced by the French New Wave cinema, Italian neorealism, which we didn't get into in this course because I go into that in my film course because we simply don't have time. And so there's a new way of filming movies on the cheap, not in a Hollywood studios, out on locations. And so these people went on locations with handheld cameras and they were more free to film, and the audiences flocked to it. These movies made money, and some of them were gigantic hits, like The Exorcist was the gigantic horror hit based on a bestseller, and that's all covered in the movie, I should say, based on a book by um, Peter Buskin. If you watch the movie, it was right there. I asked three really simple questions. If you watch the movie, and I could tell on some of the responses that some of you did not watch it. It looked like you did some research online because you don't mention any of the things I just mentioned. Um, and so you don't get the points for that. It's too vague. It's not detailed enough. How did that generation of filmmakers influence the audience? Well, the audience came to those movies, which was me and my generation, and we saw something we could relate to in The Graduate, in Shampoo, and Bonnie and Clyde, in The Wild Bunch. There's something we related to, and we wanted more. And so that influenced us. It influenced the way we thought. We go, oh, look, Hollywood understands this now. We see somebody up there we understand, someone who isn't just a fairy tale, a fantasy, but is for reals, because that's what we're all looking for in those days, was reality, not fantasy. And so that's how those movies influenced a generation, an audience generation. How did it all end? Jaws and Star Wars came in, and those weren't gritty, realistic movies. They were more fantasy fairy tales, and they made so much money that Hollywood saw the writing on the wall. They didn't need these smart, know-it-all young filmmakers coming to them with their stories. They knew what to do now. They took back control, and they knew how to make the big blockbuster, what they call B movies. They were melodramatic B movies. Literally, that's what Star Wars is, folks. And they know how to do that. And they didn't need these young upstarts telling them what to do, especially a few of them had some failures, like Scorsese's New York, New York, and Robin Altman had some failures, and Hal Ashby's, some of his movies didn't make the big bucks that they were hoping for. And they felt, well, we know how to make these kind of movies. And of course, after that, we had decades, and we're still dealing with the sequels, Star Wars, Rocky, Superman, Batman, X-Men, Marvel Comics, into what we're doing today. So if you said anything like that in your three responses, you'd get your points. Not that many got them all right, because I could tell you didn't watch the movie. The answers are too general. I wanted specific answers. And if I didn't get them, you didn't get the points. So that's where the quiz was, okay? The other thing, some students are reaching out now because they want to make some extra points, and so I'm going to sign an extra point paper you could do for 10 points, an essay, a critical essay about a current movie that I thought was outstanding this year. But you're going to have a streaming device to see it. It's on Netflix, it's on, I think, Hulu, but you got to have those things to see it. Or you got to go to YouTube and you pay a fee for it. I don't think it's too much. I hope it isn't. But it's on Netflix. I know that. It's called Poor Things. And when Emma Stone won the Academy Award for it, and she was outstanding in it. Real original movie. Um, if you know the term steampunk, that's it was set in a time and place that doesn't exist and has never existed, and it's gothic. It's a gothic horror story, but it's also human and very original, very very original. I'll sign it. It'll be in extra points. You'll look forward to the assignments. You can write about it anytime. I'll open it up tomorrow probably, and it can stay open for a month. I don't care. Um, Watch the movie and critically write about it. Don't just give me a review, or if you thought it was cool, if you liked it, but why does that movie matter in the world we live in right now? And I'll give you more details on that on the assignment. So look for it. If you have outstanding essays that you have not done, please submit them to my email at rexhaas at Yahoo. You could get the points, not all the points because you're way late, but you will get some points, and some points are better than no points. I'll I'll announce that also. But please get your assignments in. There's no excuse for not doing all this essays. You will get some points, and I allow a lot of time to do them. Um, I'm going to shut up right now. I'm going to show you, look for documentaries on the novelists, on writers. Look for the next assignment on writers, modern writers, novelists. Um, and I'm going to start a discussion in the next day or two on what's your experience, your reading experience. Do you have one? Share it with us. Anyway, I'll shut up now. Look for more good stuff. We're just getting underway. The game is afoot. Art is happening all around us. Let's get down to the nitty gritty and get dive do a deep dive. See you later.